Hey fellow gliders, welcome back. I'm Robert Petito, and in this video we're going to do a deeper dive into tabs and tab containers. If you haven't watched my first video yet on setting up tabs and tab containers, go ahead and click right over here or click the link in the description below so you can get caught up, because we're going to pick up right where we left off using the exact same app from that video. Tabs and tab containers are two of the best features to come out in 2025 because they allow you to create submenus in your app. And if you recall from the last video, that's how we purposed them. We created tabs as submenus, allowing our screens to be much cleaner and to provide a better user experience for screen navigation. But submenus aren't the only way that you can leverage tabs and tab containers in your app. So stick with me in this video because we're going to show you all of the ways that you can hack tab containers to do a variety of things, such as filtering, onboarding flows, form screen hacks, and how you can style them to make them truly mobile friendly. So let's stop talking about it. Let's get right into it with our first use case. Now, the first thing I want to point out is that tabs already look pretty good on both desktop and mobile. So here we see on desktop, I have my tab here, and it depends on how far I'm zoomed out. We can see that you can fit lots of tabs across the screen here, right? However, if I switch over to mobile view, we see that these two tabs are already taking up quite a bit of space horizontally in our screen. So what happens then when we add a third tab with just as much information? For example, what if I wanted to add a tab of salespeople to my dashboard? And I go ahead and add a new item. We'll call it salespeople. And we'll include an icon to make it consistent with the other tabs. And we'll add a badge with the number of salespeople currently in the app. And now all of a sudden, our tabs, we have to kind of scroll horizontally in order to see them. And I mean, it works, it's fine. But if there's like 3 or 4 more tabs, then on the mobile view, you're not going to be able to see them right away. Now, again, on desktop, it looks just fine, but on mobile, it looks squished. So what if we could style our tabs on mobile devices to condense the tabs to make them easier to read? And so here is something you can do with that. So if I come over to tabs here, I'm going to go to options, and I'm going to give our tabs a custom CSS class. I'm going to call this mobile tabs, and you can name it whatever you'd like, but for my case, I'm going to call it mobile tabs because I'm going to use it just for mobile. So when you define a CSS class for any component, you can then use that class for styling purposes in the settings portion of your app. So if I come over here to settings and appearance and scroll down, we see here's where I can then use custom CSS, and I can customize anything that Glide has already provided for me, or I can leverage any of the classes that I have defined. In this case, my mobile tabs. Now, in order to do CSS, when you're defining a class, to style it, you throw a period in front like that. And then you can create subclasses to really fine tune the what you're targeting here. But ultimately, you want to have a curly bracket to start and a curly bracket to end. Now, one way that we could condense these tabs is by only showing the word of the tab if you've already clicked on it. So these other ones that are inactive, the sales calls and invoices, let's go ahead and hide the word in order to kind of condense everything. So we need to target that word. Now, if you haven't ever inspected a web page to figure out what sort of elements you can style, it's actually fairly simple. You're just going to right click somewhere inside that web page and select inspect. There's a keyboard shortcut for it as well. And then the icon in the top left-hand corner allows you to select elements. So in our case, we want to click on that and then select the word in the tab like that. And it brings you right to that element. In this case, it's this class wire tab navigation bar, blah, 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 styled span, blah, 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 right? So we're going to go ahead and select this, double click and copy. Okay. Come back over here, and we have to place that bit inside of square brackets like this. Okay. However, I'm noticing, and this is because I know how Glide works, is that we can't use these 5 or 6 characters that you see here.
This is what's called an unnamed class, and it's subject to change however Glide wants to change it. So it's unreliable, can't use it, gotta delete it. Okay, but now our classes don't match. So what you can do is you can do a fuzzy match by typing an asterisk in front of the equal sign. And now it's going to look for any class that contains this information. In this case, I probably stop after styled span 2. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everything after styled span 2, like this. And that's going to target, okay, the words inside of our tabs. And just so you see that it's actually going to find it, I'm going to go ahead and preview custom CSS here as well. Let's go ahead and just color it red just to see if we're targeting them correctly. We should see that our words are red. See that? And what we want is for our words to be removed. So instead of coloring them red, I'm going to say display none, like that. And then boom, now our words are gone. But it also removed the word from the selected tab, right? So we got to find a way to prevent that from happening for the selected tab. So if I navigate up a little bit higher, I see that there is a data state of being inactive or a data state of being active. So really, I only want to target the tabs where the data state is inactive. So I'm going to copy this element, and in between mobile tabs and this class, I'm going to do another square brackets like this and paste that in. And now we see that I'm only targeting the inactive tabs, and of the inactive tabs, I'm targeting that text and I'm displaying none. So now we only have what's left is the word of the active tab, which means if I were to select a new active tab, that should be the word that we see. Look at that, pretty cool, right? That's not too complicated, right? We created a class. We looked and inspected that, hey, there was this inactive class that we could leverage. And then we targeted with a fuzzy search, the class that represents the text of that tab, right? And then we told it to not display anything. Okay. And now you see that we actually have some nice gaps in here, right? So if we wanted to, we could probably easily fit 2 or maybe even 3 more tabs in here. Okay, now this works great, but we don't need it for desktop, right? So if we're in a desktop view, we can show more text here because we have the real estate for it. So if you wanted to, you could actually duplicate your tabs and have one for mobile and one for desktop. And if you didn't know that this exists, it exists in Glide. You can actually specify which components show up for mobile and which components show up for desktop. So in this case, I'm going to have these mobile tabs, and these tabs are going to be just regular. So to make them regular, I just get rid of the CSS class like that, and it comes back to normal. I'm going to rename this desktop tabs. And this one's already called mobile tabs here. And what you do is for the mobile tabs, you set a visibility condition on it such that it shows up when the device screen size is small, right? Meaning it knows that you're on a smaller device, like a phone, right? And the desktop tabs only show up when the device screen size is large, meaning it's a desktop. Okay, Glide tries to make it easy for you. You either have a small display or a large display. And the large display also includes maybe an iPad, right, or something. All right, so now we see that for desktop, we see the full words, but then for mobile view, we get that styled version instead. Now, while we're on the topic of styling, there's another styling hack you can do with tabs, such that the tabs always persist at the top of your screen. Right? There might be a time when you have a lot of data here. So for example, in my sales calls, if I were to just limit or get rid of that page limit there, right? And I were to scroll to the bottom of my list, now my tabs are gone. And now I might not know how to navigate back to invoices, knowing that I have to scroll back up to get there. So what we can do is we can make this tab at the top sticky such that when we scroll down, it persists at the top of the screen. And here's how you can make any component sticky, in this case, our tabs component. What you do is you first throw those items into a container. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new container to the top of my screen. I'm going to bring my tab components into that container. Okay, and then in my container, I'm going to set a CSS class. And I usually just call it like sticky header or sticky container or sticky tabs or whatever you want to call it. Okay, I'm going to copy this, head back to settings, appearance, and go to our custom CSS. Okay, and I'm going to add a new styling. I'm going to hit dot sticky header, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. Okay, and here's how you make a component sticky. What you do is you say position sticky. Okay, like this. Then we want it at the top of the screen. So we'll say top 0. And then we also want to make sure that it's on top of things. So as if things are scrolling, we don't want the things that are scrolling to be on top of, layered on top of our tabs. We want them to be layered behind, which means our sticky header needs to be the most layered thing on top. And you can control that using z-index. So I can type -z index and just make it some like high number, like 999 or something like that. Okay, so if I did this correctly, when I scroll down with my sales calls, that header should be sticky at the top. Hey, look at that. Now you might notice that it's clear. See that? So you might not want that, right? We might want a background in there. So we could set a background color. So I'm going to say background color, and we can make it whatever you want. You can make it red, which is really ugly. Okay. You can make it the accent color. Okay. Or what I like to do is I like to just make it whatever the current background color is. So how do you figure out what the background color is? Let's go ahead and inspect it. I'm going to go ahead and right click and inspect. Okay. And what we're looking for after selecting the background here is some sort of variable color. And I see it right here. See this, it says VAR, which is a variable color. And this is the name of the variable color. In this case, it's that black color. And what's cool about using this is that it will change the color based upon the theme. So right now I'm in dark mode, so it's black. But if I go to light mode, this exact same color variation will be light instead. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this code. And under background color here, I will paste and then semicolon to wrap that up. And now it should be the background color, as we can see like that. That's pretty cool. Okay. And then just so you can see it, if we were in light mode, okay, we see that, again, it's in the same color as that base color. All right. So that's how you go about styling a sticky header for tabs. And that works on both mobile and desktop. What's also cool about sticky header is that you can put this container anywhere. So if this container was somehow like, below my big numbers like this, okay, is that as I scroll, it'll scroll like normal until it reaches the top of the screen and then it becomes sticky. See that? So playing with that sticky styling is actually pretty interesting in certain use cases. Our next hack is using the tab containers to house custom filters. So let's head over to our sales calls table so you know what I'm talking about. Now, any collection that you add to Glide has the ability to have in-app filtering like this, where you can select columns from that table. And then that thus brings open a drop-down container here, which allows you to filter your list of items by anything that you select. Okay, and this works really well. Only problem with it is that, one, you're kind of limited to checkboxes for filtering. You can't type something in or slide something or choose something sometimes. So you're kind of limited to just checkboxes, and it's a lot of scrolling sometimes. And it's tucked away behind several clicks, right? And when you're in this view, you can only see a total amount of filters. So if I select 3 salespeople, right, and 3 company members, I'm just getting this filter of 6, and it is not very descriptive as to what I'm filtering by when I'm on this view. So for that reason, a lot of people like to have what they call custom filters. And a custom filter is simply a choice component
that allows you to write to a user-specific column in your data editor, and then you're filtering your table based upon what you've selected. So I'm not going to go through the nitty-gritty of how to set this up. I have other videos on that. Maybe I'll link them in the description below. But I'm going to go ahead and quickly add some of those items here so you see what I'm talking about. So let's say I'm going to clear my filter. And I want to be able to filter my list based on zip code and status. What I can do is I can add 2 choice components. One for zip code. So I'm going to write to, I already have this set up, a user profile sales filter zip code, which is a user-specific column in my users table. And I'm going to duplicate that and then say I want to write to my sales filter status. All right. And then my zip code is going to come from my sales calls, and all my values are going to be zip codes. So then that way I can see a list of zip codes to filter by, right? And I can sort this list eventually if I wanted to. Okay. And then for status, I'm going to go ahead and still have my source be my sales calls. My values will be the status. And I have a color already in there. And I can set the style to be chips, kind of like this. And this is the status, not the zip. Okay. And so when I select certain items, and I kind of want this to be, well, let me select multiple here, perhaps, for each of these. Okay. So when I select these guys, I select some zip codes, right? What that's ultimately doing is it's writing those values as comma-separated strings here in my users table, because it's just a choice component writing to a column. Okay, I have a whole video on this. Again, check that video out. All right, but where the tab component comes in is that we can now organize these filters much more prettily, right? Because the more filters I create, the more my sales call data is going to be pushed down the screen until eventually it's not even visible. I have to like scroll to see it, right? So here's how you can kind of go about doing that. The first thing you have to do is set up a tab container. It's really up to you. And then I'm going to create a tab for each of the items that I'm filtering by. So in this case, I'll do one for zip code, and I'll do one for status. Okay. And then I'm going to bring my zip choice into my first tab, and then my status into my second tab. Okay, so when I choose zip code, I get the zip filter, and if I select status, I get the status filter. Now we're going to go ahead and add the filter to our table, so that way our selections will actually do something. I've already set this up. Again, this video is not about the filtering, it's about the tabs, so I'm not going to show you how I did this. Save that for another video. Watch for that coming soon. But we want to set up where the zip code and the status match, right, what I'm selecting. So is included in, and then the user profile sales filter, if zip IDs, oh, sorry, I want the row ID. And where the row ID is included in user profile, sales filter, if status IDs. Okay, so because I've selected progress and completed, those are the ones that show up here. And for zip code, I've selected 5 different zip codes, and those happen to be the 3 corporations with zip codes that match those statuses. Okay, so the filtering is working, but what about the visuals of the tab container, right? So first thing, I'm going to go to the tab container. I'm going to change my background here to highlight just so I can easily see that this top section is for filtering and the bottom section is the data. Okay, next, what I'm going to do is display a badge for each of my tabs, right? So if I go to my zip code, I can display either the count of how many zip codes I've selected, or I can actually show the list of zip codes that I've selected. So if I were to do that, the badge would just be what I've selected, which is the user profile, sales filter, zip, right? So you can see I have this comma separated string of zip codes perhaps in here. So we can see that there's 1, 2, ... maybe more. And same thing for status, right? The badge being the user profile, sales filter, status. I've selected 2 things in progress and completed. So we see that there's possibly more than one thing here. So having the badge be a selection for your filter works really well when you're selecting just one thing, right? It looks really good when I'm selecting just in progress, right? And you can kind of see that here, right? Or just completed, let's say, right? So that way it doesn't matter which tab I'm on. We can see that I'm filtering by the completed status. And if I filter by nothing, right, then I see everything. Hence, I don't have a filter for the status, right? Now, if I wanted to show a count instead,
Maybe I like how this looks with maybe the statuses, but I want for zip codes, maybe just want a count of zip codes. Right, what we can do is just count how many options there were. So I've already, see, I said I have to just, I'm already relating them. So for zip codes, I just do a count. So I'm just going to say count zip and be a roll up column. And I'm going to roll up the relation count unique. Save. There we go. Okay. All right, so there we have our 5 items. All right, if I only chose 3 items, I'll get 2. If I choose nothing, then I get everything except for my statuses. All right, so that's how you can use the tab, or the tab container in this case, for the organization of your custom filters for your collections. The last hack that I want to show you is how you can use a tab container in a form screen. Specifically, how you can allow the tab container to dictate whether a field is required or not required, depending upon the circumstance. This is something that's always been kind of tricky to do in a form container up until now. All right, so let's go to our invoices table, and let's say we want to add a new invoice. And when we add an invoice, we're typing in a company here, which doesn't make quite sense if we already know who the company is. We only want a new company and a new company logo if the company doesn't exist. So all that means is that in our form screen, we can add a choice component, and we'll add it maybe above our company section here. All right, and we want to choose our company. So we're going to write to company. And our source is going to be our list of invoices and then values companies. Okay, so we can select a company, right? Or we can type in a new company. And if we select a company like this, we see that it automatically fills out this text box, which is cool. Okay, the only problem with this is that this looks ugly, right? And if I type something new here, because it's a new company, we see that then this choice component looks ugly here as well, because it didn't find my company that I just typed in. That's to allow users to either enter a new or choose an existing company. In this case, we're going to add in a tab container to the top. This only works with tab container. It doesn't work with tabs because of visibility condition issues. Okay, so we're going to click on tab container at the top. We're then going to choose 2 tabs, one for existing and one for new. Our first one will be new. So we can say new company, or we can choose existing company. Okay, and then what we do is we drag in the appropriate column or components. So our choice component is going to go inside of the existing company, and our text entry of our company and company logo will go inside of our new company. Okay, and when they open up the form for the first time, it should automatically choose new company, or they can type in something new, right? Or they can choose existing company, and they can enter something in. And then what's great is that you can make one of them required, right? So we don't want them to select something to be required, because if they have to enter in something new, then the form will error out. So instead what we want is we definitely want a company. So we're going to make this text entry under the new company, the one that's required, like this. Okay, so then that way, if they were to enter in a new company, they can then submit the form, right? And if they go to existing company and they select a company, we see that it also allows them to submit the form, because when they've selected the company, just like before, back over here in the hidden new company field, it actually filled that company name in under the required field. Okay, this is why a tab container works and not a tabs component, because the tabs component would force you to set visibility conditions on each of these components, which then negates the required field if it's hidden. In this case, when I select existing company and I no longer see this required field, it's not really hidden with a visibility condition. It's just temporarily hidden because of our selection of our tab. So this still gives
the feel that you're selecting something. And for this reason, I like for my tabs component to have buttons instead. So it feels like they're selecting something like a button, right? And then they can continue on with their form experience here. And if they didn't select anything, right, it still won't let them submit, even though this field is not required, because this one is and it's empty, right? So the moment they select something is when you can then submit the field. So this is a great way to use a tab container to control the submission process of a form based on a field and a required field writing to the same column. All right, fellow Gladders, hopefully you learned a few new things about the tabs and the tab components. If you have other hacks that I didn't mention in this video, feel free to leave them in the comments below. You can also reach out to me at Twitter at rpetito, the Glide Community Forum, or at unropedapps.com. And as always, thanks for watching.